So it just takes a couple of minutes. But thank you all for being here tonight. I do appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Hey,
Appreciate
I
it.
think this is a great event. I think it's wonderful that you're doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to start trying to do discussion panels once a month based on different things, very geek related, of course. You know, Star Trek is such a phenomenal franchise that, and there's so many fans. Like, you know, I wanted to do it. I wanted to show it a little appreciation on the site. And, you know, when Ian came to me and talked about maybe being on the show and talking Star Trek, and then I put the word out there, I was like, is anybody interested in being on the show? And then like 30 people hit me up. I was like, all right, this needs to be more than just one show. I think this needs to be a week or so. But so that's kind of like where we're at now. And you guys have just been amazing. I appreciate it. I do. Like this is I mean, I'm very humbled by everybody coming out and really helping out with all of this. Definitely.
Well, thank you for doing it.
I no problem. As long as I can, you know, if I love doing this, I love doing these shows and being able to talk to such interesting people. So like for me, this is, you know, my biggest pleasure. You know, I've always loved doing stuff like this. And
Yeah, this is always nice to be able to find and connect with new Star Trek nerds. So
Yeah.
super stoked.
This is my human quota for the day, so my interaction. This is good.
with COVID, I think it's everybody's human quota for the day.
Truthiness.
In fact, I gave up on seeing my kids for today just so I can meet this quota.
Oh my.
You guys stay in your room. I'm not allowed to have interaction. Very nice. Okay, so we're getting started. We are okay. So here. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Star Trek panel for tonight, the world of Star Trek. I am your host, Mick Manhattan, the Scene Snob, and it is a Star Trek Appreciation Week here on the site. So thank you for joining us. I have an amazing group of characters, not really characters, wonderful people, I should say, but they have characters, so that says something, on the show tonight, and we're going to be talking the world of Star Trek. So basically how this is going to work out, I want to start by talking about in-world. I want to talk about the commerce of the Federation and the surrounding territories. I want to talk about the history. I want to talk about the science. I want to talk about the education. I want to talk about the entertainment side of things. I really want to engross ourselves in this world, and these people are going to help me do it. And then afterwards, I want to talk about the world that was created by the world Gene Roddenberry created. So that, and I want to talk about the cons. I want to talk about the fan appreciation and things like that. So without further ado, let me introduce this fine group of panelists. At first, I want to go with Casey Plott. Please, Casey, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Casey.
Do you have anything to promote?
I don't have anything to promote except for the Scene Snobs, which
well,
if you're already here, you're already watching.
I very much appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. And Casey and I go way back. We've done podcasts together, Mystery Elephant Podcast, and he has also done Off Topic Radio. So he is a seasoned pro in this. I want to ask you, Casey, what is your favorite series in the franchise, and who is your favorite captain?
I'd have to say my favorite series in the entire franchise is Next Generation. And my favorite captain is, oddly, over the years, has turned into Captain Benjamin Sisko.
Very nice. We are going to get back to talking about why, but I thank you for telling us. And I want to go on to Ian. Don't mind me. I didn't even introduce my wife on the show last night. So
No problem,
Ian,
Rick.
And that will be my name for the rest of the time. Rick Berman, to be precise. Ian Lovejoy, he's a councilman out of Manassas, and he is up for re-election. So make sure you get out there and vote on election day. I want to just say that. But please, sir, if you'll introduce yourself.
My name is Ian Lovejoy, and like you said, I do serve on the Manassas City Council, but I'm not really here to promote anything. I'm just excited to be with fellow Star Trek lovers. This is the month normally would be going to convention and wasn't able to, so it's nice to get a little dose of it here with some like-minded Star Trek fans. So excited to be here. My favorite series is Deep Space Nine, and I agree with Casey. It's Ben Sisko. So that's definitely where I am now. Yeah.
Very nice. Awesome. Thank you very much. And Ariel, Baska, please introduce yourself and what you're here to promote.
Hi, I'm Ariel Baska. I am the host of Ride the Omnibus, but that's not really important because we're all here to promote Star Trek, really, and our love of that, and also our love of Mick Manhattan because he's amazing and put this whole thing together. But if I had to say that I have a favorite Star Trek series, it is DS9. And my favorite captain will still, unfortunately, have to be the captain that I grew up with, which is Captain Picard, because, yeah, he is my captain.
I will say this before moving on. I do want to promote Ride the Omnibus. It is a fantastic podcast, and it has taught me a lot, and about not just about movies, about books, about history, about sciences, and everything in between. Ariel's a fantastic educator, and if you get the chance, go listen to the podcast now. Now, my next guest, Mr. Matt Anderson. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and promote, please, sir.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Matt Anderson. I am the co-host of a show called Terribly Awful, which is right now filming season 3. Mick, you're going to be a guest star on it. The series will start the first Wednesday in October and will run for 12 weeks. So something nice to enjoy during the winter months, fall and winter. As far as Star Trek goes, my favorite Star Trek is DS9. I'm so glad to see so many DS9 fans here. And as far as captains go, Benjamin Sisko is definitely one of the ones. Kirk is still always my first captain, but the captain I think that doesn't often get a lot of credit, but he actually had a fairly decent impact, is Captain Jellicoe.
Wow. Wow.
Because he came in and he got Deanna Troy out of those ugly ass jumpsuits, and he installed some discipline, and he got that ship tighter than a drum. So
from 3 shifts a day to 4 shifts a day.
Ben was the perfect in between, you know, the stuffiness of Picard and the shoot from the hip of Kirk. But Captain Jellicoe, he's still the man as far as I'm concerned.
Right up there with Ben Maxwell.
Right. Oh, Ben screwed up when he didn't go do things right. At least Jellicoe was on orders.
Casey can attest this, and I was actually, after Alex went, I was going to say, no BS. Of course, my favorite captain is Captain Jellicoe. It's not really my favorite captain, but Casey and I have had many an argument over whether Jellicoe is actually a good captain or not, and I maintain he was. And Casey maintains he wasn't.
He was certainly in charge of things.
He got rid of the
Still figured out what those things were.
Well, I mean, Captain Jellicoe is the kind of leader that when I was in the military, I kind of followed along. Although I will admit, I'm kind of sad that poor Captain Janeway is not getting any love, but I think that's more of a fault of Voyager than of Captain Janeway herself.
It's the fault of Voyager, and it's the fault of the writers. Like, there was so much inconsistency in her character, literally from the first 3 episodes onward, that it made no sense. Like, they wanted her to be in the holodeck doing, Jane Eyre, basically. And then they also wanted her to be, representative of, the great scientist. And then they also wanted her to be, uncompromising and yet diplomatic all the time. And she just never worked as a character.
And very difficult considering you have the strength of Sisko and they're trying to marry that with the Picard-esque that they had lost and they missed. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Janeway never got a good shake until about her final season, honestly.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that weird
in the
love story
final
with
season, it's
Chakotay
too late.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
It's a
But-
good place to start, actually. Alex, unfortunately, is fallen out. Hopefully, he can come back. But so many said DS9, and because I want to start there now. Then, because it is such a vastly different show than the ones that preceded it, and Captain Sisko is very different. A very different captain. They've improved that with Q in the beginning. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Which show handled the politics side of things
Deep Space
best,
Nine.
and why? I'm gonna require everybody's opinion on this.
Well, I think Deep Space Nine was really the first series that really tried to dive into it a little bit. You didn't get a big taste for how the politics of the Federation functioned under TNG. You got a little bit of it in the movies. Just you knew there was a president, you knew there was a council, you didn't know how it operated. But it was central to DS9's story arc to dive into the geopolitical, is not probably the right word, but interstellar political nature of the Alpha Quadrant. And it was the first. It was the second time we finally got to see a president of the Federation, Jarish Inyu. We saw. We heard the Federation anthem for the first time, and "Take Me Out to the Holosuite." So those are kind of like the key points that they added a level of depth to the political nature of the Federation that was just not in existence in the other series. And so I think and I think that's actually missing from consecutive series. Like I would love to dig deeper into those things outside of books, which many have been written. But yeah, so that's my vote.
Well, and that's why, like, when they introduced the Maquis and the whole concept of what happened with the Maquis, that really showed as Sisko, he gives this big impassioned speech about it's easy to see how things are from paradise, where you're out in the trenches, you got to deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And that's where I like with Picard, the new Picard series, is it really shows exactly what happens to a large empire like the Federation. And yes, I'm not saying empire as in like Klingon empire. I'm saying its span was great. What happened after the Dominion pretty much kicked their ass from here to Sunday.
Right.
And then how they are now, in some ways, not the best version of themselves that they used to be, the ideal for the best part. Now here they are, turning their backs on people and just doing all sorts of stuff. And
I think that was handled really well in Insurrection. Just showing from the movie side, they definitely covered all that, showing the weakness and how intergalactically, politically instead of geopolitically. I don't know. I'm with you, Ian. I have no idea how to say that.
That gives me a great question. But before we go on, Alex is back, and I do want to introduce Alex. Alex, please introduce yourself, what you're here to promote, and I want to hear your favorite show in the franchise and your favorite captain.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Mick. I had to run upstairs for an Ethernet cord, so I just sprinted all the way up from my basement. The internet died, but we're doing it. We're doing it live. That's all right. So my name is Alex Orphanos. I host the podcast Today in Space. So I went to school for aerospace engineering, and I talk about all things space and science. So I kind of bring the technical side to the conversation tonight. So thanks for having me. I grew up with this. I grew up with my father and my brother watching this. We have the entire VHS line of Next Generation. So that's I'm very proud of that. So I'd have to say that's got to be my favorite series. Picard is my favorite, but he's an unachievable captain. Like no one else. I don't even think real life there could be a real Captain Picard, but I'd say he's my favorite.
All right. Well, you know what? That's actually going to come up. I do have a question about that. And do the ideals of the society lead to people like Picard existing, but also Sisko? But we were getting into the political side of things and how it sustains. And one question I had based off of what Casey was saying with Insurrection, this is such a big and wide-reaching federation. And we've seen many times where admirals that were leading the charge in Starfleet were corrupt. and doing things that did not stand for the Federation, did not hold the Federation's ideals. Now, my point there is, and coming to my question, can you sustain a Federation like this when Starfleet has admirals that really are going unpoliced out there?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I remember reading the topic list, we were going to discuss the world of Star Trek. And that the world of Gene Roddenberry came in, there was no conflict, no strife, everything was perfect, utopia had been achieved. And so the fact that you had all these Starfleet admirals and other people, like what we mentioned, Captain Maxwell, going off on his own, and some of the other stuff that's happened with some of the other captains and admirals and stuff, just shows that you cannot achieve a utopia. I think part of the reason why that, if you go by that, they just were sick and tired of having to play the good guy, and there was no challenge anymore. Exploration is a challenge, but once you've met all the planets and you've done all this stuff, what else is there? What's the next challenge? And some of them, I think, just kind of got lost along the way and wanted to find some new form of challenge, because in Paradise there was nothing else. When you reach that high in the Admiralty, if you go by the Gene Roddenberry world, that world's perfect, it's sterile. And then as it turns out, then you have Section 31 and all those other folks, and it's, why would anything like that exist in Paradise? And it's because people are people, and they can't just not have something to challenge or find a different way of doing things. So I think that's the reason why. I don't think that some were corrupt, but I think it was more the fact that they were just kind of sick of living in Paradise and decided to take a bite of the apple and their own way.
And you'll get someone like, sorry, Ian, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, my theory is that all the good captains want to stay captains, and so the people who end up getting promoted are the subpar captains who want the title and the advancement. But true good captains want to be in the field and in the fleet and continue exploring. And so who's left to get promoted, but perhaps not the best captains?
Like Admiral
As
Cartwright,
is true of
someone
everywhere.
who couldn't not fight Klingons. He just
Right.
always knew his life as fighting Klingons. So of course he's not going to be okay with a Klingon, Federation peace.
And then
That to him
apparently
is despicable.
he sired Ben Sisko at some point too, apparently.
Ariel, you started to speak. I want to hear what you had to
Oh
say.
no, I was just saying, I was just adding to Ian's point, as happens with all administrators everywhere in every form,
Peter's
know.
principle.
where, whatever you're originally doing, usually the good people stay in those positions rather than going up the ranks to become administrators. And you see that in Star Trek across all the series too, so.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I like your point. All of your points are very good. Of course, there's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be some sort of, in every society, it's going to happen. Now, I want to go on to the good captains. And what their differences are. The captains that we know. So we have very diplomatic captain in Picard, and we have. I don't think it's crazy to say that Sisko was almost as a captain that was born in war, after his wife was killed, and he was, a lot of people say he was the perfect person to lead DS9 during that charge in that war, in Dominion War. So then you have Kirk, who was the explorer, but he was more the man of action. If anything, he wasn't very diplomatic, which is kind of what you needed in a Trek, I would think, in that 5-year mission. But I'm throwing things out there. I want to know what you guys think. I want to compare the captains right now and their different Treks. Could any one of them work in any other world, do you think?
I think if you put Sisko on the Enterprise with in place of Picard, I think you would have seen a closer to Picard captain in him. I always think like I've been watching DS9 from start to finish lately, so I've really been diving into it, and I think Sisko's like an untethered Picard. Like he really is, like, he doesn't have to worry about the Enterprise, the code, because he's helping the Bajorans create their society, you know, like trying to start back over from scratch while also deflecting the Dominion, while at the same time the Cardassians. I mean, he's got everything. He's got to use everything at his disposal. He can't really do everything by the Starfleet code.
Mhm.
You know, I think with, you know, Cisco also had the extra burden of being the emissary of the prophets.
Right.
So for Cisco, you know, his captainship, you know, he starts off as a commander and we see him get promoted to captain. His captainship is born under just three very different things: grieving after his wife's death, trying to be a good father, and in trying to not only be the spiritual leader but the military leader against the Dominion and keeping Bajor safe. I think that's with Cisco. Yeah, he never could have functioned on the Enterprise because, quite frankly, the Enterprise is full of a bunch of prissy people. The only one who actually had any kind of anything was Riker, and he was just a man whore. And so I don't think Cisco would have responded to that because nobody on the Enterprise really was hardened in battle as nearly as like O'Brien and Bashir.
Picard and the Stargazer.
Yeah, well, the Ferengi, come on.
A fight's a fight, man.
Yeah, the Ferengi, yeah. Well, I'm not going to say the term. Anyways,
No. Let's keep this. Come on.
but I mean, you know, it's the thing is that, you know, none of the captains were very much of their time. Kirk was the Federation was still fairly young-ish. It was still, you know, exploring. It was really where by the time Picard came around, the Federation was very established. Yeah, they were still making first contact, but you notice that it was much more expansive than the original Star Trek. And then with Voyager, even though the big misstep of them putting them in the Delta Quadrant instead of having them behind the lines of the Dominion War, where they could have really had some good stories. You know, she just basically was just trying to get her butt home and her crew. And so she really didn't have anything. And of course, you know, we've already discussed about the writing and stuff like that. But, and then, you know, then you get to, you know, then you flash back in time to Archer. And Archer's definitely, you know, he is pre-Kirk. You know, he is what Kirk will eventually become. And so you really couldn't put any of these captains in these different time periods because they are all products of a federation. And that's why I love about with Picard is he finally got some character development, where in TNG was the same from the first episode to last episode. And now in Picard, he is a broken man, but he's still got the fire. He's still got the desire to do the right thing, to the right people. And again, he's kind of the idealized Federation in a world that has gone completely crazy, just like some of my ideals and my personal and political views.
Let's keep it Star Trek.
Naive. It'd be considered naive, but it's because I believe in those ideals. But I also live in the real world, and so I know that to have those ideas, sometimes you have to fight for those ideals, and that's what I like about the new Picard as opposed to the old Picard. And so that's why I think that the captains are products of their time period, because the worlds that they lived in are very different than each captain lived in a very different world.
But I would throw in. Oh, sorry. No, Ariel, please.
Oh, I was going to say, though, that I do feel that because Janeway kind of got such short shrift on Voyager, I still feel like she is the one captain who probably could have gotten plunked down in a different time period and worked had there been a little more openness in different time periods. So, like, she spends a whole story arc longing for, being with Kirk's team. I think it would have been interesting to actually have her in that kind of fringes of space, you know, before even being concerned about diplomacy in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like because they created her as the character responding to so many different aspects, she's the only one I can think of who doesn't really feel like a product of her time. She feels like a mishmash and therefore could have been plugged into a lot of different shows for better or for worse.
Yeah, she didn't get the fair chance.
Yeah.
Think, either. And,
And I think each one of those. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, sorry about that, buddy. To Ian's point, though, earlier when he said that maybe she wasn't the best captain, that's why she's an admiral so early on. And you know, I'm just kind of bringing some humor into it, but you know,
she made it to admiral. She's the only captain to get her ship so lost it's on the other side of the galaxy. So that sticks to a good captain wouldn't have been sucked to the Delta Quadrant. So
and wouldn't use the Prime Directive as the reason to say let's destroy our only way home.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that the biggest Voyager needed more of the Deep Space Nine treatment in that. Yes, there was an overall arch, but there was no progress along the arch, really.
Right,
you could pick an episode from season 2 and an episode from season 5, and you didn't know if they were further or closer to home. And it wasn't until season 5, 6, 7 that they started to be, okay, they're in some communication back with the Federation. They're starting to
and there's finally Troy, and there's finally Barclay.
And you knew they were going to go home when they dumped Neelix off.
Yeah.
You know, 2 episodes before the end, you knew they were going to make it home because they left Neelix they discover a mysterious Talaxian colony where there shouldn't be one, and they dumped Neelix. So you knew right then they weren't going to bring Neelix with them. So the ending was kind of obvious. But there was a really good missed opportunity there where they could have really built more, I think, about the actual voyage home instead of. Why'd they keep stopping?
Yeah.
Like they just kept stopping. Like you're trying to get home, straight line. Like it doesn't make sense. It's like
all the time with either a fuel or
and it was just like, oh, there's a star that we hadn't seen before. And I'm like, I get that, but just, you know, straight line, man. It's space. Just that's how you get home fast. Just kept detouring.
That's why I think that if Voyager started with them exploring the Gamma Quadrant, and then while they were on one of their deep missions, got stuck behind the Dominion line, that could have given Janeway the opportunity to shine, to be able to have to fight her way home and still be in contact and still, you know, trying to do that. That could have been a much more better storyline than, unfortunately, the Kazon, which is basically the Ferengi of Voyager.
Yeah.
And then
I'm noticing a lot of hate for the Ferengi.
Well,
I love acquisition. Come on.
Their development in Deep Space Nine is one of the greatest species developments of Star Trek.
That's what makes Nog so special.
God bless Nog.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Aaron.
I didn't mean everybody was hating on Ferengi.
The early Ferengi were terrible. I mean, in the early concept, obviously, but the way they matured, that they did a correction. Hats off to Star Trek, the writers. They were like, they're not going to be the next villain, and they did a really good correction and made them more, some of a comedic, aspect of it, but still some of the best Deep Space Nine episodes are Quark-centric Ferengi episodes. Who mourns Silvermorn? I'll put that on when I'm bored and just listen to it in the background. It's so good. Like
and the scene between Quark and Garrick about root beer is like to this day like maybe one of my favorite scenes ever.
It's fine.
I do want to go on to another aspect of the Star Trek world, the world of Star Trek, as I should say, the title. And I'm gonna start with Ariel and Alex on this one, and it has to do with the science behind it and the education side of things. Alex, I'm gonna ask you: A, can we get a warp drive sometime soon? Are you gonna build me one?
I would love to build you one. I'm gonna have to take it out for a spin first. But no, there is actually what's amazing about what Star Trek did. I mean, if you look at all the science fiction that they predicted that's coming true today, and I was watching DS9 the other day, kind of not a technology thing, but their 2024 prediction, I mean, scarily very, very close to what's happening in San Francisco right now. But that's besides the point. Touchpads, like those interfaces they were talking about, just internet and storage capacity in the 90s. Nobody was thinking about that at that point. So they have been planting these seeds of the things that have been created in today's world, and so many of that stuff has come to fruition. Warp drive, the problem with warp drive is we don't have a fusion engine. We don't have enough power to do that kind of thing. But there are people that are working on it. They're basically just waiting for that capability to happen. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the Neuralink presentation from Elon the other day. But that, I mean, that's next level. My brain's been spinning about that. And we literally saw that in DS9. That was with the Vedic, I forget his name, but he had to.
Right. They kept
Thank you.
replacing parts of his
Yeah.
brain.
That little button that's on his head, that's basically Neuralink. I mean, that's essentially like all those little things are C's that are put in. So yeah, I think it's possible. That one requires a lot of energy.
We got a question from the audience watching, and I think I'll start off. Everybody can answer, but I'll start with you, Alex. So did Star Trek predict the technology, or did it inspire people to make the technology, like in the show? What do you think?
That's a good question. I mean, from what I've seen, I think so. The problem from talking as an engineer, the big problem that engineers and scientists have is they get very technical and very specific too quickly. But what Gene Roddenberry did with the science fiction was he was able to give us the big picture view of what it could be, instead of us getting stuck in the nitty gritty of how is that possible. So I guess, I mean, I'm sure they had plenty of meetings with people that were kind of at the bleeding edge of all this stuff. Like one of the things they definitely got wrong, like in that 2024 prediction, like there's still a huge monitor, computer that's built into a desk, because that's how they saw it going. But we've got these things now, so that's obviously not the case. But yeah, I think they plant the seeds for the potential.
And one more question, and then Ariel, I have a question for you on the education side of things, and then I have a history question for you, Casey. So, Alex, by saying that, now we have shows that are being made now that actually take place before the original series. How do you, in your opinion, the shows, how have they held up? Are they just becoming too technologically advanced in their look and their style and everything, by your opinion?
Well, I think that's one of the brilliant things the writers did by sending them into the future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, spoiler, folks. I'm sorry. So it's one of those leaps of faith you got to take. I mean, Star Trek, yeah, they've done a good job of kind of riding the line of whenever something kind of ridiculous, we kind of just like brush it off, like, okay, whatever, we're here for the characters and the storyline. But I don't know, it's one of those things where it's not believable, but Star Trek just, you don't like if it with Star Wars, it'd be really tough for them to go backwards. And I think they have that issue for them. For whatever reason, the Star Trek world is so like congealed together so well. Like you can just follow the storyline very, very quickly, where I don't know, it's difficult with any other series. I mean, I have this app on my phone that I get to see, they do these little series. It's a Star Trek game. It's, just wasting time, but I love it. And they'll do like different series of different story arcs, and it's basically a timeline cross, and it works perfectly. I don't think it works that well with Star Wars. Not to bring up that, but
you play timelines, Alex?
No, I want to, I appreciate that answer. It was fantastic. And I have a better understanding about the science now. That's why you should all listen to Today in Space. So going over to Ariel, who is the educator, who I want to talk to about the education in Star Wars. So like we get there, not just the captain, but many of Starfleet's finest are very well educated in many aspects. So Picard is very educated in Shakespeare, of course, and I know that follows the actors and when it comes to the writing, but I want to talk in world. They're very educated in, Shakespeare also comes up in Undiscovered Country and in the original series, many other aspects, classical music, things like that. For you, how, in your opinion, would that be the case in that far in the future? Do you think that these things would hold up and stay so relevant?
Okay, so this is coming from a Latin teacher, so you will hear this bias coming from me, but the whole premise that, you know, certain things will survive into the future and certain things won't, I have a hard time believing in all the things that they seem to have access to, and that they're always so Eurocentric that, like, all the things that everybody, you know, quotes from all the time, or sites that are familiar to us as American viewers, that they're all extremely Eurocentric things. That there are very rarely references to
Eastern anything.
like the Tales of Genji, or, you know, the Edo saga,
or the Tao Te Ching, or
yeah. Like it makes no sense to me why they chose such a very, very white curriculum that everyone in Starfleet would know, when Gene Roddenberry was trying to create such a diverse world. Now, I grant you that education as a whole throughout American history has been very, very white, but this is sort of one of those things that I would have hoped that the writers would have broadened a little personally. It's not that I don't think that Shakespeare and classical music will have survived at that point. I think they certainly will have. I just think that, you know, there will be possibly more appreciation for other things from other cultures that have not necessarily been valued as much in the past.
Well, one of the ways I think they made this storytelling simpler was they made different culture. Each planet ended up being basically a monolithic culture, one fashion, one ideology. Klingons are warriors. They wear the same outfit. Ferengi are greedy. They wear the same outfit. And unfortunately for humanity and, you know, that part of the Federation, they made it Western. And it was, you know, because I keep going back to, there should be, you know, they sometimes allude to the different dialects of Klingonese, and, you know, they allude to the fact that there's some variation there, but each of these planets should have different political systems and different economic systems and, you know, all sorts of different variety, but they just steamrolled over it and made kind of each one a monolith.
And that always disturbed me, actually, as someone, I mean, again, my training is in Latin and linguistics. And so as a result, like, I was always really bothered by the lack of linguistic diversity as well.
To that point, I kind of want to ask Casey a question based on this. Do you think, because there was a World War III that happened that killed many, many people within the world,
600 million.
Yeah. So in the world of Star Trek, do you think that maybe it's just these things that survived?
Well, if we're gauging back to when Roddenberry was looking at what superpowers would have survived, because at that point it was a matter of who had the nuclear capability and the functionality to be able to take out other countries. Unfortunately, it was heavily Western. Yeah, so when you're looking at it from that angle, from that aspect, the people who would have survived in his mind were Americans first. So everything from there kind of trickles down. Now, and unfortunately, you don't really get any more expansive grasp of anything beyond intergalactic until Hoshi in Enterprise. You know, that takes a long time before we have a xenolinguistic kind of understanding that there is something greater than that. And they call back to it with Uhura in the Kelvin timeline show.
Yeah.
But it does take a long time for us, and that's more of just culturally where we are. Now, that's the great part about Star Trek. It was always bleeding edge, because you have the first interracial on-screen kiss. You have these other incredible historical things that happen along the way, yet it's really hard to break from the fact that it was heavily Western influenced. And the idea of, at that time, who had, you know, if we think about now, April 5th, 2063, well, of course, we're the ones who have all the nukes. You know, if you're thinking from the mindset of a guy from the 50s and 60s, you know, it was us in Russia. So that's who survives. You know, you'll be more likely to read Descartes than Confucius. So that's kind of where he was influenced from.
Okay.
Oh no, I totally get where he was influenced from. I just always thought it was interesting though that there wasn't this idea, given the obsession with archaeology, specifically with Picard, you know, there wouldn't be this sense of going back through the rubble to find other things from other cultures.
Right. You know, as much as Picard pushed on, even he mentioned the Sumerians, and yet never, like, because he brings up the tale of Enkidu.
Like, yeah.
And that was the end of it. Yeah, exactly.
The only one who actually showed any interest in other than Western culture was Cisco, because he had all his African
That's true.
stuff. So again, another reason why Cisco is such a great captain is he actually was not just like every other captain liking all the same stuff. Although I have to admit, I kind of like on lower decks when on the last episode where Mariner comes in and the character Boimler is playing this, you know, stuff that you'd hear on like Next Gen, you know, a violin piece, and she just comes in with a heavy metal guitar and just starts jamming.
Well, that's I don't even know where this fits in anything. I just want to observe the number of times they would open a scene with a captain just reading a book, listening to classical music alone in their quarters.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know what the point was they were trying to make exactly, but it was just shocking. Every time it comes up now when I'm if you binge them, it just happens in every other episode. It's like
all the time.
The downtime is spent reading just a book. I mean,
just showing captains are chilly, and captains are chill, man.
They're definitely chill. Like, leave the holodeck.
They're smart and elitist.
They are. It's all jazz. It's all classical music and books.
You know, and it's interesting too, because I've been thinking about this lately with everything that's going on, and I've been trying to think of it with context, right? Like 1966, right? That was the first. That's when Star Trek started, and so they only had their 1960s mind and perspective to even think of this stuff. So I'm not giving them leeway, but what I will say is, for a series that's lasted this long, it has a track record and a habit of growing with the times and growing with the added knowledge.
Absolutely.
So I know it's tough, you know, especially I didn't even live back then. So I'm like, okay, well, what were they thinking? You know, you watch Kirk now, you go through the first series, you're like, woo, like this.
There are some rough TOS. I mean,
yeah.
Lincoln.
So much rape. I went back and rewatched the first season recently with my husband, and I was
TOS.
like, yeah, TOS. Yeah. And I was like, I don't remember it being this rapey, but apparently it is.
Well, they have the yeoman bringing food to the captain on the bridge, and like they cut that after what? It was just like, really?
They explicitly say about, you know, I think it's either in the original pilot or it's somewhere in the original TOS where they're knocking having a woman captain, like how it's
it is.
When number one had to take over after Pike was captured. And that's why I'm glad they're bringing you know, on the new track on Discovery with Rebecca Romaine and giving her number one her due finally, instead of, you know, this female will breed superior intellectual children, you know, instead of, you know, banging on her because she's a woman, finally letting number one. And the short trek she did with Spock when she's singing Gilbert and Sullivan is just, you know, I love that bit because she's being a person instead of just a female.
Yeah. And I did love that too. Actually, I watched that recently again, and my kids are starting to love the short treks as well, because they're doing a phenomenal job with them. I do want to ask this though, since we're kind of getting into, do you think that going back and reshaping the beginning, you know, with like the new Pike series that's coming out, Discovery, even though, you know, it takes place in the future, they're still going to have the way of thinking from before the original series. and any new shows like Lower Decks coming out, are they kind of, do you think they're going to help the world, help build the world, or are they going to be able to kind of right some wrongs? Like last night we did a reading of Cupid, and it got very weird when the character of Vosh walks in the 10 forward and Riker just stands right up, ready to go. You know, like it's things like that are kind of need to be rewritten. Do you think that they're doing that with these new series in a good way, or?
Well, look, first of all, some of us would also stand up if Vosh walked in our room. So let's just hold up there.
But
All right.
They stand right behind her and say, "Eternity never looked so beautiful."
I mean, I think they're
Lovely.
going to tread very.
Lovely. The line was lovely.
I think they're going to. I'm thinking they're going to. They're definitely not going to make the same mistakes that were made in those original episodes. I don't know. I assume they're not going to overcorrect it with a heavy hand, because then that has its own problems as well. I think they're just going to do better. They're just going to do it right. They're going to do it better with contemporary sensibilities. If they overplay it, then it feels too artificial. It's too clunky. I think just by writing it the way it should be written with 21st century sensibilities, it's going to be infinitely better. That's not a part of canon. I need it cleared up. I don't need them to kind of explain why one ship was sexist and this one isn't. I don't need them to have I don't need a clever reason for that. I get it. One was made in the 1960s. This one's made in 2020. I know why it's that way. I don't need a clever in-story answer as to why sexism was rampant on one ship and not another.
You can be like Worf and say, like, we never
don't like to
talk
talk about
this.
Yes, we don't like to talk about it. Like, I appreciated them explaining the cranial ridges in Enterprise, but you didn't need to do that. You know, it was cute, but it's because it was a different show and it was 40 years ago and they look different. That's just the answer. And we're smart. Just we can accept that. And so I think that they will just do better by doing better. And it doesn't need to be that heavy-handed.
And the universe is infinite, so there's plenty of timelines for them to I don't know what everyone else thinks, but like if they redid, and they did that with the movies, so that's one thing. Like with Kirk and that timeline. But if they redid the series to try and, I think that's when, like, there's so much that can be done that you can easily keep the show going in advance without having to completely pull back, rewrite, get rid of it. That I think that would be where I would start being like, okay, like, do I like this?
Just as a random aside, I thought it was an incredibly bold aesthetic choice in Enterprise when they did the Mirror Universe episodes and they used the honest to God recreated set from the 60s as the Defiant Bridge, and we're just like, this makes sense. It didn't, obviously, from like the outside standpoint, like from an actual technological standpoint. But I respected them for just being like, screw it. The audience is going to love it. They didn't need to redo everything and re-engineer the aesthetic to make it look more futuristic. They just said, I like to think the captains kind of get to choose the bridge set of their own. Like there's a catalog and you can kind of choose from modular bridges. This is the future. You can replicate stuff on the fly. Why not? So the captain can kind of choose the bridge set. And maybe you could do a 1960s retro look, like a skin on a cell phone. And that's the way you get your bridge. I don't know.
So was Picard heavily influenced by 80s decor?
It was like an 80s office building. Oh no. I mean, sorry, TNG was like an 80s office building.
Or an IKEA store.
Yeah, Picard did something that they never did in TNG or really Voyager or really in the shows. There's some grounding of it into a sense of reality that we understand today. So you see a taxi, you see brands, you see commercials, you see advertising. So it was more. I appreciate that part. It makes it feel more real to me that they've made those choices. So,
okay. Well, I want to start getting into the world created from the world of Star Trek, and that is more of a fan base in our lives, and kind of go on to that topic. And I want to start off by going down the line again and say what did Star Trek mean to you? What does it and where does the love come from for it? It could just be a memory. It could be anything. Like, really, it's up to you guys. I also want to put this out to anybody watching. Please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to share your feelings on the same, and I will happily read them off. But yeah, so let's start there. And we're going to start with Casey, who just took a Chateau Picard drink. So I'm feeling some tears are going to be coming down the cheeks here.
Don't judge me.
So what does Star Trek mean to you? Where does your love for it come from? Or when did it start?
I mean, it started very much so when I was, I think, 6 or 7, and Dad sat me down and we just started watching TOS. But really what it became was, by Next Gen, it became kind of the way to live, kind of the way to treat other people, I think, is what I always took most from it. And Cisco being kind of by the time I was in high school, he was my captain. And he was the one who taught me how much stuff you don't take off of other people. So throughout my entire life, Star Trek has always played a part in growing, being better, how to respect other people and how to respect myself. And to never really judge anyone else, because I don't live in their shoes. So who am I? And I think that's what Star Trek means to me. And that continues to grow and is something I've been able to recently share with my daughter. So it's pretty rad.
Nice.
So.
Great answer. And I'm going to go to, because you guys are switching positions here. Now, Ian, I'm going to go with you next. Please tell me, what does Star Trek mean to you, and where did your love for it start?
It started for me. So I grew up in very rural West Virginia. And like a lot of people do in West Virginia, my grandparents were my daycare. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents while my mom and dad worked. And just being rural Appalachia, spending time with people in their 60s, there was, it was more Billy Graham and Ponderosa and older Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. That was kind of what we were all watching. And so I finally saw this show that had technology and it had science. And, at the time I didn't know the jargon made no sense. I thought it was, actual interesting science. And you just weren't getting that. I was not getting that in the environment that I was in. And so it was kind of the first place. My grandmother was very uncomfortable with it because she thought Data looked like the devil. And, so it was kind of, she didn't like that part of it. So it was always sort of debatable being able to watch it. But for me, it was just being able to have that introduction to just sort of the scientific part of it that was just sort of lacking in that upbringing that I liked a lot. And then I didn't even know, I think I watched a lot of Next Gen at the time before I even really knew there was the original series, frankly. Like I didn't even understand how they interrelated. And so it was years later that I finally went back and watched TOS and realized how connected it all was. So I kind of went in the reverse order than what you were supposed to do. But it's, I think if you ever get to go to one of these conventions, these are the stories that people are telling. People are becoming engineers because of it. People are becoming doctors. And it's just giving the ideology and just the way of thinking that it can introduce you to has changed a incredible number of lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've even had astronauts on the show, so that's a big deal. Ariel, how about you? What does it mean to you, and when did it start?
Well, for me, it started when I was about 10 years old. I was a latchkey kid, and luckily for me, my parents didn't realize I was watching Star Trek all the time, because they officially did not approve of science fiction or fantasy. And Star Trek and Doctor Who are the two things that are responsible for my deep, passionate love for science fiction now. And I really never found any other girls I could be friends with until college, who also shared my passion for Star Trek. When I got to college at William & Mary, there's a group called the Science Fiction and Fantasy group, aka Skiffy, and we started going to science fiction conventions in college and had a lot of nerdy fun. And like, they are still my social group to this day. Like, we get together and have Zoom parties watching bad horror movies on a regular basis. But it's like Star Trek is the thing that brought me together with my tribe, even though it took me how many years to find them. So yeah.
I have to jump in because you mentioned the tribe real quick. I met a girl at the first Star Trek convention. We dated for 5 years and got engaged.
Oh my goodness.
Congratulations.
We did not get married. Just got engaged.
Okay.
Okay.
It did not end the right way, but I just want to say you can find, it's fascinating. I met a girl at a Star Trek convention and we almost got married. And now she's
Thanks,
dating,
Ian. You've given me hope.
she's dating a Roddenberry podcaster now in the Roddenberry network.
Oh,
So
wow.
I wasn't good enough. She's moving herself up the ladder. The Star Trek.
But he's not on this panel. So
Yeah, forget that guy.
take
Go
that,
Ian.
take that Roddenberry podcaster. Matt, I'm going to go to you. I want to hear what's your love for Star Trek and when it started.
All right. Well, my love for Star Trek started when I was about 6 or 7. My dad got me into it. Actually, my dad got me into science fiction as a whole. He started me on Star Trek. He took me to Star Wars. He took me to Black Hole. He took me to Moonraker, which was my first James Bond movie. Doctor Who, Tom Baker was the doctor I started with. So it started pretty much at that young age, and pretty much shaped my entire existence, and it showed me that, the creativity of the human mind and the ideas. And you look at it back now, and some people, Turnabout Intruder, people always bag on that one, and some of the other, Spock's brain, but for a 6-year-old kid, that was amazing, and it showed me that that it was okay to be creative, and it was okay to be smart, and it was okay to learn and study and grow. And Spock showed you, what it meant to be a smart guy and be the smartest guy in the room. And Kirk showed you what it means to be true to yourself. And McCoy showed you what compassion was. And then, Next Gen, when Next Gen came along, and I was just absolutely excited by it coming out. And now I look at the first 2 seasons of Next Gen, and I absolutely loathe them.
Mm-hmm.
And my issues with the series as a whole. But at the time, being a teenager and going through a rough period in my life, Star Trek was what got me back to showing it's okay to be a fan. It's okay to love something like this, and it's okay to share that love. And if people don't want to share it with you, well, that's okay. But that's what Star Trek really showed me, is that it showed me my love to science fiction, as well as my love of creativity and writing stories, and just thinking about all the different ways you could be who you are and not have to apologize for it, which is one thing I will say about all of the characters in Star Trek, no matter which series you watch, none of them apologize for being who they are. They are secure in who they are. The only thing I can definitely say, though, is when my son told me he is not a fan of Star Trek, it got me right here. But that's okay. He's a Star Wars kid. We both love Star Wars, and we both love our show. So it's okay, because we all have our loves, and it's okay to love and not necessarily have to like everything that everyone else does, but still respect that love and that your interests. So that's what it does for me.
Absolutely, and that's amazing. And I will tell you, there's still hope for your son.
Oh yeah, this time.
I am a late bloomer in Star Trek. I watched Next Gen as a kid because it was on syndication, and that's what you watched at 7:00 after dinner on Saturdays. Casey knows this. I fell in love with the movies when I was a teenager, and that's what got me into the world of Star Trek.
Well, there's also a science. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. So I was just going to say, that's what got me into to fall in love with it, and then go back and rewatch the series. And like you were saying, I think you were going to say the science behind it. I was going to say also the ideals behind it. I think
but there's also a science to introducing new people to Star Trek.
Mhm.
I think if you have an honest to goodness stranger and you're trying to introduce them, you don't start with season 1, episode 1 of the original series.
No.
You don't start with season 1, episode 1 of Next Gen, really. I mean, I've curated, this sounds crazy, but in dating and being with people and kind of sharing this stuff, I've curated lists, I've curated episodes just to give them a sampling of the best, because you have to. There's a science to it, and so I would say for
Ian, I
yourself,
would love to see your list because
Yeah,
I'm sure they're
Yeah.
share that,
fantastic. Like,
please, in
yeah,
the chat.
seriously.
I can send it to the group, but I have curated sort of the intro to a stranger for Star Trek because again, you can't. If I today tried to watch the original series and then understand that there's 8 series of this and hundreds of episodes and a dozen movies, I wouldn't invest the time and energy. So it's got to be done right. So
No,
Matt, there's hope.
Even for me, like it was the idea of because of always being into movies and always being into writing and stories. We were talking about Wrath of Khan with my best friend, and he told me, and this is years and years ago in high school. He was just like, "Yeah, no, Khan was from the original series."
Right.
And then, like he explained that to me, and I'm like, "Wait, what?" So like 20 years later, they just bring him back, and he's like, "Yeah, that's what it's about." So I just dove right into all the movies, and I got past Feature, and then I got to Wrath of Khan, and then went on with it, and I was just like, "Oh, I'm in. I'm definitely in on this." So and I started to, and I revisited the series as I got older and older, and just went back. And Casey was a big help with that. We were roommates, and he always had Star Trek on. It was just on. He may not have been in the room, but it was on.
Always on. It's still the way I live my life, bro. It's always on.
It's on right now. And the Pluto streaming service has a Star Trek channel, so that always just works for me. So now it's just always on. But I digress. I want to go back to Alex because I'm, especially with having a space background and an engineering background, I'm sure you're going to have a story for me on this one. So I want to know what Star Trek means to you and where it started.
Sure, I would love to. So it starts with my parents, who are both Trekkies. They went to cons, and they actually, so both first generation American, Greek Americans, and so Counselor Troy, Maria Citis, like they went to her, got to talk to her in Greek, and everyone else is going like, what alien language is that? What are they speaking? So again, like I said before, like we had the entire VHS of Next Generation. So that was the standpoint. And for my dad, it was a tool for him to teach us about different things. So me and my brother. So we would put it on, he would talk to us about it. And that, I mean, today we could sit down and we could just have a marathon and sit down and talk about all the different things. So we had Next Gen, we had Voyager, because those were on at the time, early 90s. Midnight is when I was growing up. So those were the two big ones for me. And, it's funny, it's had different roles. Like I took a break from it for a few years, got back into it recently, the last 5 years, really hardcore. Obviously with Picard coming out, it was, with my girlfriend, trying to introduce her to Star Trek. So I had to, with the season coming out, every time an episode would come out, I'd be like, okay, we need to watch this episode. So I was curating a list while we were watching the season. And then we were bouncing between Voyager and Next Generation. And we even went back to the pilot episode. So I was bouncing around the entire timeline. So that's been super cool to be able to do that and pass that on. And now she's correcting me on things in Star Trek. So that's fantastic. But right now, especially for me, so I went to school for aerospace engineering. For me, it was the space shuttle, which that really made me want to go. But it was also my deep love of Star Trek. Like, Geordi was a big, I mean, of course, with Reading Rainbow too. So I had LeVar Burton. Like I had him in everything in my life at that time. So it was great to have him there. Scotty, obviously, another famous engineer from the Star Trek series. But it was really, for me now where I am, it's about the storytelling and for what I'm doing with Today in Space, shameless plug. What I'm trying to do is story tell what's happening into the industry. And I've really, since I had to dive back into this and teach someone else about Star Trek, I've been able to now, with all the knowledge I had growing up watching it, I can now look at the writing and the way that they constructed the story. And for me, that's one of the hardest things that science has in today's world. Science is on the edge. Science and scientific method and facts, whatever that means anymore, that whole structure, there is a storytelling aspect that's missing that Star Trek gave us all. So if I can share the story a little bit better by learning, by watching those episodes to understand, okay, it's not, the important thing isn't the number of the thrust that this rocket can do. The story is, why is it here? Why is it important? And so Star Trek for me has done such a fantastic job of doing the most difficult thing that scientists and engineers have a hard time doing, which is explaining the why. And so for me, that's everything right now is storytelling, and it's penetrated my being at this point. So that's where my focus is at this point, just the amazing storytelling.
I want to change my answer. He had a better answer.
Can I share my biggest Star Trek pet peeve?
What's that?
Can I?
Oh, absolutely. No, go ahead.
No, I love that, and I do want to go with that. I do want to go with the pet peeves. But Ariel, what were you going to say before we get?
Well, I actually never said what it was that I loved about Star Trek. I just sort of said what it meant to me in terms of like how I trickled into the world of Star Trek, sort of. But like, what Star Trek meant to me as a kid was actually, I'm going to get a little personal for a minute. Because I was a very marginalized kid in a lot of ways. I grew up with disabilities and felt very alienated because I had a facial disfigurement. I later had cosmetic surgery when I was a teenager. But when I was a kid watching Star Trek, watching the way that the crew interacted, and the idea that, the alien races were not, different, were not, marginalized in the way that you would expect and you saw in like everything else on television. And there wasn't this overall sense of strife around absolutely everything on TNG. Like that was what attracted me to it in the first place. And there was in Star Trek also this sense of ideals and the way that you should live your life. But I feel like I was most attracted to this idea that science ruled over everything, that appearances, the face value wasn't what mattered, and that appearances weren't, that you were always looking for the deeper meaning in everything. And it might have been the only piece of media I ever saw at that point in my life that really looked for the, deeper meaning, the science, the, whatever the specific detail was that drove everything. And I think for me, that was the thing that made me love Star Trek the most.
That's a great way to put it, and I love that. And I think I think we all feel that way. And I can tell how Star Trek has inspired so many just in talking to you guys. And I see how it comes out in your personalities, in making entertainment, and working with science, working with linguistics, and working with people, and listening to your podcasts, and how acceptance and such, and how everything you've been talking about recently, leadership with you, Ian, and how you handle things, and you work to better people's lives. That's what I see you do that all the time. I follow you closely. And Casey, you just look like an alien, dude. No. History was a big thing with Casey. Casey is very, he would bore me at times with history for hours, but I always learned something, and it was amazing because you would just go for hours and hours and hours when we lived together. But
that's totally fair, bro. That's the data part of me. That's the part of me that was the more realistic portion of who I am as a human being, and I was able to relate to someone who was trying to figure out emotions as a kid, and that. Totally fitting.
I can see it comes from like your love of Star Trek. So like this has just inspired so many, on so many levels, and that's why we see it in such big ways with the cons. And there's cons everywhere, and you have fans everywhere, and they just want to live that. I want to know. We're going to get into a fun aspect here in a second. I do want to talk pet peeves, and I want to talk a couple other things and get your opinions on it. But I want to ask this: how realistic? Maybe not in our lifetime, but can we get to a world of Star Trek?
Geopolitically, economically, scientifically, and what dimension are you talking
Yeah,
about?
there's a lot going on there, bro.
Yeah.
It's heavy
Yeah.
packed.
The answer is yes.
You all have specialties. Specialties.
I think from a geopolitical and economic standpoint, I get this question quite a bit. People know I do a little bit of politics and I'm a Star Trek guy, but all political systems and economic systems are ultimately designed around allocating resources, and how they do it, and we can debate till the end of time which way does it best, and our culture is really debating that right now in a lot of different ways. But Star Trek kind of cheats in that it largely takes place in a post-scarcity economy. You have near infinite energy and you can replicate things generally from scratch. So the things that lead geopolitical movements and economic movements today, which is allocation of resources, doesn't exist largely in the world of Star Trek. Anybody with a replicator and a fusion reactor can essentially create or do anything, and that doesn't even bring into the topic of the holodeck and all the things that you could do with that and quality of life wise. So they kind of skip the part where you kind of go from any kind of allocation of resources based economy, and they skip over to just everyone can have anything, and as a result we all pursue our best selves, and that's why they're reading books and listening to jazz. So the answer is, I mean, as a local politician, the answer is life's much easier when you can type something into the microwave and magically materialize anything you want, and a lot of problems go away when you can do that. And so yeah, we can absolutely, I think, have a lot of that peace and stability on the economic sense when resources are essentially infinite. The problem is they're not, but we're heading there. And Andrew Yang brought that up a lot during the primaries, and I think that we will get to the point where materials can be made faster and more quickly than you need even humans to make them. And there's going to be a lot of questions that we have to face about what happens to a workforce. 3D printing, I mean, that's just the beginning of the technology. I think in our lifetime, and I see Alex is doing the thing, within our lifetime, I think we won't have replicators, but I do think you'll be able to dial something into an apparatus and produce one-off pieces of technology and food, and the price on that is going to get driven down. So we're not at the point where it's a non-scarcity based economic system, but in the next 150 years, it's going to look a lot like that, and how we navigate it, and how what do you do with human capital and human productivity if all needs are met? What are the better angels of our nature? Are we going to read books? And I'm a little nervous because humans today have more free time than any humans ever, and I don't know that we're doing great things with it.
We're not reading books and listening to jazz, bro.
We're not reading books and listening to jazz. We're taking pictures of our food and doing TikTok. So I am nervous about what a truly idle human future looks like, and whether or not we're on trajectory to live up to it. And so that's where the philosophy needs to be taking over with all this idle time. And as a species, that's where we're going to get faster into a post-scarcity economy before our ideals evolve to the point where just self-betterment is our motive. And that's sort of the disconnect I see over the next 150 years, 200 years.
And I'll throw a curveball in there from the space perspective. We talk about this on the podcast a little bit, but if you've been following along at all to what's happening in space, the idea of bringing home an asteroid that has rare minerals that are literally not available on the Earth, but could flood the market to a point where like the value of titanium could drop to below a cent.
Right.
Like that kind of thing, if we can start tapping into the resources that are out there in the solar system, the question, I mean, that's amazing. So there's already people who are scouting out asteroid fields, doing prospect mining, essentially, to try and tell people where everything is. And then someone with a mission is going to go there. How that plays out is really the biggest thing. We've got Jeff Bezos I would be highly doubtful that he's not in that game. He's got Blue Origin, who's got the ability to go into orbit. You've got Elon Musk that not necessarily going that route, but you've got kind of renegade billionaires like them. space treaty right now, if whatever country it launches from, basically they own it, they're responsible for it essentially. So it could completely either mess everything up or put us into a place where we move so fast forward. The concern, like you said, is what are our values? What are the things that we believe in? Because those beliefs are moving just as fast as the technology around us. So, yeah, I don't wish it to get to the point where it's like First Contact, where they have to go post-nuclear and basically have a Hail Mary to get the Vulcans to figure out that you have warp technology. Like, I don't know. And we've had a lot of strange alien confirmations this year. So who knows? It could happen. But yeah, the values portion is definitely a concern. Like where?
Yeah, and absolutely true, because when we do have the idea that we're going to be able to go out and reach out and do this asteroid mining, and we're talking about increasing the total amount of income to a nation, almost quadrupling. We're talking just astronomical numbers. So when you look at those numbers in reality, they don't make sense. And yet a simple asteroid is going to change the landscape of the world.
And I'm going to be very honest from an educational standpoint, based on what you said, Alex, that the values part of it is what I see that's missing in a lot of ways from the way that schools are building their curricula these days. Because the emphasis has been traditionally in the last 5 years in particular on STEM programs, but it's been on STEM without pairing it with any kind of understanding through the humanities lens, without pairing it with any kind of sociology or psychology or understanding of literature or deeper analysis or critical thought. It's like, if we do the math problem, if we can do the thing, then that is all we need to do. But if you're only working on those specific solutions and not looking at the larger issues and the context, it really ultimately makes no sense. And I'm really sorry that my friend Ellen is not on here right now, because she would have a lot to say about this as a physics teacher. But she has told me so many times over that there is a general lack of critical thinking that she always has to address in her curriculum, because the teaching of science in the core science classes has gotten to the point where the values is so divorced from everything else, as well as any shade of real thought at a deep level.
Yeah, we've lost that golden age of thought, that purposeful thought, the Descartes, the philosophical reasoning, and the purpose of why we think the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
We're not becoming warrior poets.
Yeah, and that's concerning to me. I mean, so I went to school that was all engineers, so you can imagine what that was like. No other majors, just engineers.
I went to school film students. Come on, imagine what that was.
Fair enough. But I've seen the version of a scientist that has, I don't want to say no values, but that looks at things as just a problem to be solved. There is no why. We're just amorphous, and this is a belief, and I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying if that has a certain color that it adds to the hierarchy of humanity, if everything is nothing and it's just materialism, and it's just another boring problem to solve,
just
another
things and
problem.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a problem. It definitely is. If that's the main big message. I mean, we're a bunch of stupid monkeys. I mean, I hate to break it to everybody, but I'm sorry, not monkeys, apes. But
risen apes, not fallen
risen
apes.
apes. You're right. But like we have that. We're not cybernetics. We're like, and if you have that ability and that's how and that makes you a good person, great. Like that's all you. But it's not for everybody. And something that Andrew Yang said on a podcast, not to bring him up again, but he was saying that like you were saying, there's this big push to be STEM and engineers, but I can tell you by the school of just engineers, like 20% of those people dropped out freshman year because it wasn't what they wanted to do. And more people that go into the STEM fields without knowing what they want to do with it, or where they want to place themselves, or what skill they want to use, they hate it. It's paperwork, it's grinding. You know, I've met so many men that have lost their hair super early that I would guarantee is the stress from an engineering job and not having that outlet. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be worked on.
I'm going to go out on and go steer away a little bit here. Maybe it's just because I do more entertainment than most of you folks. The one thing that actually that Alex said earlier is power, and I think that all those things are possible if we have a way that we can find the power to get it done. And as far as education, I agree. If you just knowing how to do the problem isn't going to get you to understand why the problem is there. I took a stats class, a business statistics class, and for my master's, and all I focused on was the problem solving. I didn't understand why we were doing it. I just tried to figure out what the problem was. And I got a C in the class because I didn't understand what I was doing. I was just doing the work. So you definitely have to understand what goes with it, with what you're trying to do, along with understanding how to do it. And I think if we can, as a species, can get past that point where we're constantly just focusing in on the job and not on the purpose behind the job. I think once we figure it out and we understand that we all got to work on this together, then I think we can finally start moving forward and start finding the power that we need so that we can go to the asteroids, and so that we can hopefully maybe, you know, stop wasting resources and find better ways to use those resources. And you know, and everybody use that critical thinking so that people can actually get to the point where Roddenberry's post-apocalyptic utopia comes in. It's always going to have to rely on people, and us in our generation and every generation trying to get the next generation to not only understand what they're doing, but along with how they do it. But I think showing them that there's got to be, you can't just stay with what things are. If you want to move forward, you have to start moving forward, and you have to start bringing people along. And until we get out of this mindset that, okay, this is the way it is, and if you're not this way, forget it. I don't think we're ever going to get to that idealized Gene Roddenberry world. And yeah, I think that the next gen world is a little too sterilized for my taste. I don't want to ever get there. I much prefer the DS9 world.
Well, in fairness, I don't think we're ever going to get to any of these worlds. Hopefully our kids are great grandkids.
Well, DS9 is often, is in many ways the world that we live in now. The whole thing with the Bajorans and the Circle and Vedic Wind not allowing the teaching of the science of the wormhole, you know, that it was the celestial temple, period, end of sentence. Terrorism and, you know, but one of the things about DS9 was the mixing of cultures, and that the having that acceptance. So I think the DS9 of all the worlds, DS9's probably the closest one we get, unless of course we're talking post, you know, somebody does launch the bomb and then we get to Enterprise. But honestly, I think DS9 is probably the closest that we're at, and that, but it's definitely what could be if we stop a lot of the stupid stuff that we're doing now and start working together to move forward and stop this polarizing and isolating and marginalizing everybody. So
I think there's somebody brought up earlier, I think alluded to it, but there's sort of this notion that like maybe if we discover we're not alone, if aliens do make contact or we get confirmation of intelligent life, that could be a game-changing thing that brings the civilization together into a new epoch. But I would like to propose that it's actually more profound if we're alone. If intelligent life is exceptionally rare, which I mean, you know, Alex, and this is probably in your field, but like when we look up at the sky, it's not screaming at us with civilizations. So we're not getting a whole bunch of evidence of civilizations out there. So I think we have to get our mindset around if we are alone or exceptionally rare in the galaxy, then we have a huge obligation to continue to exist as a species, to thrive as a species, to get off the Earth, to be a multi-planetary species. If we're essentially it, then it's actually it's a weightier situation. It's a more profound realization than if we're alone, because if we're not alone. If there's a bunch of aliens out there, then you know we're not potentially that exceptional. But I think there's life in our galaxy, but I don't think it's proliferating, and I don't think it's proliferating with intelligence. And so that tells me I don't want to. Our civilization can't blow itself up because I don't want to be blown up. But at the same time, we shouldn't blow ourselves up because we could be it. Like we could be the most important thing living in the galaxy right now, and we have an obligation.
Which brings us very much then to that Roddenberry how.
Yeah.
So now is the next level. So what's the how? So the thing that brought us together as a nation before was post-scarcity, and we're with, you know, we discover other aliens, so other species would inspire the human race. So what inspires the human race now?
Holodecks.
I think we need to get a lot better at. We need to. My boring answer would be: we need to build the technology to confirm if we're alone or not. We need to be able to do high-res imaging of planets around other stars. We need to be able to do the analysis. And to me, if we actually come back and say, you know what, the galaxy's filled with fungus, but that's it. Like the planet Earth is. We appear to be alone. I think that like confirming that the science needs to tell us what our place is in the galaxy.
Agreed.
And I think that
Awesome.
could be a profound moment when we've looked at 20,000 planets and they're all dead, or at least not supporting intelligent life. So,
or if there's a mycelial network out there. Yeah.
Good play, Ariel.
But I mean, Alex, you could answer this better than anyone, though. If there was a Star Trek-like proliferation of civilizations in our galaxy, we would probably be able to tell right now.
Well, well, taking from the Gene Roddenberry, there's two things. The first thing to get everyone's mind thinking is, what if we add time as the variable of the equation of are there aliens?
Right.
Maybe they're not now, right? They could have been in the past.
Right.
They might not even have developed yet. So we're looking at now, but we're not even considering the other variable in the equation that it's not time to look yet, right? So that's totally possible. The other thing is with the Gene Roddenberry example, it wasn't until we achieved the warp that the Vulcans actually decided to come check us out. There's nothing, extraordinary of what we're doing here in our solar system. So, one of the things that I'm really excited about that Elon Musk is pushing is this humans, interplanetary human species. If we can prove and show that we've got ourselves on different planets, that could be the thing that if they're really as intelligent as the aliens that we think they are, why would they care about us apes here on this blue planet in the middle of nowhere? So it's almost we think I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's this like idea that it was before COVID, but in the old world, where we were like, we've reached the zenith of humanity. It's as good as it's going to be. And we kind of started tearing ourselves down from this, pinnacle that we seem to have reached. Things can't get any better. But I think that's just the plateau right before we start figuring out what we're really doing. So I'm hopeful that we've got someone who's got billions of dollars who's actually investing in something like this.
Well, Well, Alex, let me ask you
Yeah.
real quick. Based on everybody's answer here, I do have a question, and it's more of an opinion, just to get what you guys feel on it. So, because we're kind of winding down, just quick answers on this. Since we all kind of grew up before the internet, before having all of the information available at our fingertips, which I think is, and I think we all agree, kind of what slows us down into wanting to explore or experience. What's the point of going out in the neighborhood and experiencing a whole world you've never seen before if you can look at it on your phone? Almost is kind of what I'm getting at. Whereas we went out, we went all over our own neighborhood to discover new things and learn new people. Do you think that if the technology to space travel became available, would that awaken maybe not everybody, but a lot of people to say, well, now we have something that is unknown to go and experience?
Go ahead.
I would say I hope so. My concern is I think our big race as we look at our cultural development is going to be whether or not our technology turns us outwards or if it turns us inwards. And by that I mean it's the Elon Musk pig chip that just came out. It is going to be technologically easier to allow us to put a chip in our heads and sink into virtual reality. And we're going to have holodecks. They're not going to be in the physical world. It's going to be a chip in your brain you're going to be able to dump programming into. And that technology is doable. You can do that. That is not precluded by the laws of physics. Faster than light travel might be. It is going to be technologically easier for our grandkids to put on an apparatus and escape into a virtual world than it's going to be to hop on a rocket and head to another planet in another star system. So that's what I worry about, is that our technology is going to take us inwards instead of outwards. And, I'm nervous about that. And so to your point, I hope that the modest exploration of the local solar system is going to be enough to inspire people to not plug in, in 100 years and stop looking outwards. And I think that's going to be the real competition and maybe that's where the aliens are. It's hard to build ships to travel to other stars. It's going to be relatively easy to put an apparatus on your head and sink into a virtual world.
And Ian, it's absolutely fascinating to bring that up because you're looking at almost an 80-20 percentage, where you're going to have 80% of the population who's going to completely agree with you and just stay the course and go inside their own heads because they're selfish. They've created a world that they are happy with. They want comfort. Right. It's all about them.
Right.
It's the 20% that we have to hope that humanity has pushed hard enough,
right,
that we've whipped into the purpose.
Right.
And also, I've loved the fact that you have 3 new pictures behind you this entire time. I'm sorry, I've had to say it. It's been bugging me this whole time. I don't know who they are, but I love it.
Captain Janeway, that's Kate Mulgrew. That's Bill Shatner.
Awesome.
And that's the motion picture poster.
Righteous, bro. Righteous.
I'm going to take a step. For me, I believe, yes, not to plug something else, but there's a Japanese animated series called Planetetes. And it shows basically a world where space travel is fairly commonplace at that point. And it's about people hauling debris. That's the world that it still has to deal with the social and geopolitical issues, but it's still a world that has decided that Earth is not just where they want to be. They want to go further. And I honestly believe that if we have the technology and the ability to go further, I'm not as pessimistic about the internal versus external. I do agree that there are a lot of people will just go inwards, but I honestly believe that if space travel was as easy and better, at least had more legroom than flying, I think people would do it. I think if we could go to a space station just as easily as we could go from Newark to California, I think people will do that. And I think we could expand to the moon and to Mars and all that. We just need the ships that can handle it, because unfortunately it's just economically not possible at this time. Got to have the power.
Hate to break it to you. but it's not going to be that easy if the space station here on Earth, where the rockets are landing, is like Newark Airport. Okay. Newark Airport.
Very true.
All right. Well, I mean, name a good airport. Okay.
Orlando International Airport. If anybody been there, it's got palm trees and everything. It's so pretty. And then you get outside and you just want to. No, these are great answers, and I really love them. I hope, it's a hope for me that if we can create something, like we've created a space force right now, which is, it's a step forward, into not I don't want to talk political side. I want to say it's from an ideal standpoint.
It is a step forward.
It is a step.
All right.
That's as far as I'm going to go.
Space is a domain.
It is. So if we can get to a point where it's like Starfleet, that'd be great. Or we have something like Starfleet. I will say that way. I'm hopeful that there are going to be many people who are just like, well, if I can join up with something like this and explore, I'm game.
And I can give a real life example of that happening too, actually. So I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Mars One mission. Mars One was this idea, was this foundation that was going to buy a bunch of rockets, start setting up a colony on Mars, and basically crowdfund their way to send people. And it could be anybody, because the NASA Astronaut Corps is its own special group. They're trained extremely well, but military people essentially. So
Air Force.
Space Force, right? You get a free lightsaber when you sign up. But the big thing that Mars One did was it sparked a conversation, and the best way I can compare it is, and it was what I'm hopeful for, is that human behavior that's built into us. The same thing that got those crazy people to get on a boat and come over to America is the same thing inherently that's going to make people want to go out into space. So I think there's that group of us, like you were mentioning before, the 20%. That's baked into the equation, and NASA's astronaut corps applicants, as the amount of applicants that have applied recently, because they're seeing space, they're seeing stuff launch more. There's a plan to actually go to the moon. People are actually getting interested, and from my perspective, because I've been paying attention to it for almost 10 years now. They were just atrophied. Our space program, NASA space program, atrophied after the space shuttle got retired, and nobody thought NASA existed. When the space shuttle died, people were asking me, what does NASA do anymore? Do they even exist? Meanwhile, they were doing all the stuff they were doing before, just nobody knew about it. So luckily, we've got all this pop culture with space. So I'm riding it into the black hole. So.
Well, that's a great point, and I also I kind of want to think of it as the point, like you said, the 20% that go. So now, if we're sending 20% of Earth's population, not even like the U.S. population, Earth's population, and they're going, the other 80% are going to have lots of jobs to make those starships, if you will. And, that might awaken up more of the percentage. That might, some people who are making them might say, well, this might be a cool deal to go and do this out and work on these ships out there. So, you never know. Maybe we'll lead and we'll get more of a 50-50, or it will lead me up.
I think in the next 400 years, the more likely outcome is going to be like The Expanse, if anybody watches The Expanse. So practical, intra-solar system. You could have written all of Star Trek in one solar system with colonies.
Still would have been a great show.
Expanse,
Yeah.
Still been a great show.
Yeah.
The size and scale is kind of irrelevant. It's just a colony here. It's a station there. You didn't have to go in galactic. So I think we're going to at least get to The Expanse type of solar system colonial. Once we get self-sustained off of Earth, the species almost can't go extinct, and I think that's important. Like, we owe it. If we are not alone in the universe, we are at least rare, and so we owe it to the universe and ourselves to make extinction virtually impossible. So
if nothing else, the pure hubris and ego of humans.
Yeah,
Just
I mean-
we are all encompassing, all being, all knowing, all purposeful. So we are the all everything.
Right.
So we just want to go do more, be better, be best.
Be best.
Alpha and the Omega, baby.
Bingo.
All right, so I want to get into a little bit more fun of something. I have a couple questions. We're gonna do it real quick.
Whoa, Mike, I'm not doing it naked. I told you I'm not doing it naked.
No, you're wearing a perfect hoodie. You got to keep it on. And that will lead to my first question. I want to know what everybody's favorite uniform from the Star Trek universe is. I will start. I will say what Casey's wearing. The red coat, the red overcoat was my favorite from the movies, from the original series movies. Was my favorite iteration of the uniform. So Casey, how about you? I'm gonna guess you're gonna go with the same.
No, I'm not. I actually love the DS9 where everything was colored on top with the full black suit and the symbol actually had changed. It was my favorite.
Okay, very cool. Ian, how about you?
Next Generation, when they finally landed on the forever uniform in Next Gen. So season 3, give or take. Not the weird form fitted, the poorly draping. Yeah, from
the one that's zipped in the back and like had a weird crotch thing. No.
Yeah, didn't like that. But when TNG finally stabilized on its uniform, I enjoyed that. I'll buck the trend a bit. I like Enterprise's jumpsuits. I own one. It's the easiest one to do. But very, very practical, thoughtful evolution of it. Has the NASA jumpsuit feel, but a Star Trek feel. So I respected that.
You're a maniac, Ian. I like it.
I'm a madman. Nobody likes anything about Enterprise. That's the one thing.
No, I love Trip, man. Trip was a great engineer.
Well, I'm a Quantum Leap guy, so I had such high hopes of Scott Bakula in that role. So
yeah, well, Scott Bakula in anything other than Quantum Leap should have warned us. So
easy there. It's the writers. Just blame the writers. It's easier.
Gifted actor.
Hey, for someone who makes movies, yeah, it's always the writers. It truly is.
Ariel, I want to know your favorite iteration uniform.
Well, I'm actually with Casey on this one. I think I think the DS9 uniforms were absolutely my favorite, and and the series is my favorite, so I guess that goes hand in hand.
There you go.
And Ariel, you're my favorite today. So there we go. Look at that. 3 for 3.
All right.
Matt, how about
Virtual 5.
For me, I'm with Ian. It's the Enterprise. This is the jumpsuits from Enterprise. I find those are the perfect utility.
They made sense.
Yeah, they make sense. They make absolute sense. They remind me also,
they have pockets.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I'm Air Force, so retired Air Force. So that's like, that was my everyday almost. And actually, Ariel, you'll probably get a kick out of this. They remind me of the unit suits that they used to have in the first, and like the Invasion, and then the first season of John Pertwee, the old kind of overalls before they switched back to the traditional jacket and uniforms. It also
okay.
So it's that style. That's what I really like. It's functional. It makes sense. It looks good. And it's not. I'm sorry. The next gen uniforms were god awful, including Deanna Troy's. Oof.
Don't even.
Well, Alex, how about you? What's your favorite?
Sure, I'll throw a curveball out there. It's actually, I don't even think it's the legit outfit, but it's whenever Picard wears like outdoor wear, not the top that was like a totally different fabric for whatever reason, but that gray and black that he had on underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot.
Okay, that was a cool jacket. I did like his jacket, his red jacket.
Always a deep V though. If it wasn't in uniform, it's always a deep V.
Yeah.
Well, because that's what Beverly liked, was the deep V.
All right.
Ghost Men.
But nobody liked the cruise ship style of the motion picture.
You mean the motion picture? No, good God.
No.
I did have to admit, for the longest time, I did want one of the jackets from Star Trek from Wrath of Khan on the big jackets, and I loved how those evolved over the years, almost until next gen, because the Enterprise C had a modified version, this no undershirt and turtleneck, and so that uniform was pretty much the style up until TNG, and then we got the rest. And I just never really liked them. Although the one uniform I have been enjoying is the ones actually on lower decks, and I'm actually dying to see what those look like on cosplayers, because I'm curious to see how those would look real, because the animated, everything you can make anything look good animated because there's no physics, but in reality, I'll be kind of curious to see what those look like, because I think those have the potential of being pretty awesome. Not as good as the Enterprise jumpsuits or the red jackets, but
I think Matt, I think they show something similar to that variant in one of the flashback scenes in Picard, where he's the one where he puts in his resignation.
Oh yeah, when he's talking to Rafi. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. Yep.
I think the lower decks uniforms are based on that.
okay, yeah.
Someone vet that, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, no, that's it. But yeah, I definitely like. And the motion picture ones. Oh, what the
Well, we don't have to talk about that. No one's on the Love Boat. It's fine.
colored outfits. Ugh.
I shouldn't have brought up.
No.
I swear, I promise. I was just kidding. Real quick, again, we're getting to pet peeves right after this, but just quick answers. Favorite Enterprise? Go, Casey.
But Enterprise, out of all the Enterprises, everything ever freaking called an Enterprise, right?
Not everything, just the Enterprise.
Okay, the B.
The B. Okay, Ian.
It would have to be the Enterprise from Discovery with Pike, the re-envisioned one.
All right, Ariel.
Reimagined one.
I'm with Ian on this one.
It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. It feels heretical to say it, but is it.
But it holds the aesthetic. It makes sense. It's gorgeous.
It is.
Matt, how about you?
Star Trek motion picture Enterprise, the refit.
Mm.
The nacelles is what did it for me. The nacelles and the little details in the model. That's what did it for me.
Alex, how about you?
I'd have to say the Enterprise from the first of the new movies that came out. That first Enterprise, just the way that thing came in and out of warp was amazing.
Yeah, the Kelvin was Molony.
I would go with personally the E. I liked when they brought it back after Generations, and it was the new ship and what it did in First Contact, and then so on. Like I thought
wouldn't that be the E?
Yeah,
It was the E. He said E.
I said E.
I thought he said D. Sorry. Yeah, because the D looked like
the D. I want the E.
They all rhyme with each other, okay?
Well,
My
they all start with Enterprise, so whatever.
sovereign class ship. So that would be where I would go with for my favorite. But I'm glad I got everybody's favorite Enterprise. That is awesome. Now I want to go pet peeves. What's your pet peeves? Let's keep it rolling a little faster. Run out of time, but I want to go with your pet peeves of Star Trek and what really bothered you.
Talking about the Prime Directive.
Actually, okay. I do want to hear more about that, but I'm going to go backwards because I feel like poor Alex always gets left in the last. So I'm going to get to Alex on this one first.
Sure. Actually, I just saw this on a Star Trek meme because that's all my is filled with. The kid that became an orphan, and Worf took him in to be his son and his family, and we never see from him again.
Oh, and
Yes.
Just disappears. Doesn't even know Alexander. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. Matt, what about you?
For me, it's the characterization on Next Generation. It's horrible.
Jeez,
Nobody
I've never
changed.
heard so much hate for Next Generation.
I don't get me wrong. I love Next Generation. I love episodes, but as far as character development, nobody except for maybe Worf got any development whatsoever. They stayed this pretty much exactly the same from episode 1, from Encounter at Farpoint to All Good Things. Nobody really changed. It wasn't until Worf got to DS9 that he's even what minuscule character development he had got to explode. So my biggest pet peeve is Next Gen's lack of character development. Say, don't like Voyager, don't like the writing, don't like the way they did Janeway. Even that had more character development than Next Gen.
Okay. All right. Ariel, how about you?
Chakotay's faux Native Americanism.
Ugh,
Yes.
ugh. That's a good one, Eric.
Unified front. Yeah.
Strong.
Very nice answer. That's a great answer. Ian, how about you?
It has to be scale and distance in the space scenes. So they would always be like, oh, the enemy ship is 50,000 kilometers away. And then you would see it. It's like 50,000 kilometers is, you can't see anything at 50,000 kilometers. So it's a pet, that's why it's a pet peeve. All they had to do was say 5,000 kilometers, 100 kilometers, 10, it was an easy fix. And that's why it's annoying to me.
Enhanced screen.
Yeah, but it would be like the outside shot. It'd be like they're 50,000 miles away, Captain, and there's the ship here and the ship here, and it's like that can't be 50,000 kilometers.
It's not right.
Ian is actually right, because when you actually, the magnification, and then all of a sudden the ships, then they show cut away to the wide shot, and there's the two ships, and it's, swear to God, they're maybe millions of miles apiece, but they look like they're about 50 feet apart.
Just fix the scale. That's all they had to do. Whoever the technical writer was or the supervisor, they could put any there. Why? It doesn't make sense.
And those warp numbers didn't make any sense.
They tried later.
Or like what's a class 2 probe? What is that?
Better than a class 1 probe.
Is
Alex.
it though? Is it?
Well, some things can go through different nebulas, bros.
Lots of nebulas. God, you just would have thought we would have figured everything out there was to know about a nebula. Janeway would have gotten home faster if she didn't stop at every nebula.
All the nebulas.
Casey, how about you, buddy? What's your biggest pet peeve?
Transwarp drive. Alex understands.
All right, fair enough. I would say
It's the fakest fake thing that ever faked on Star Trek.
you really are adamant about this. I will say this: my biggest pet peeve, I think, was when it comes to Star Trek, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the shields just never seemed consistent.
Oh yeah.
The
Defiant? The Defiant goes down like with 2 hits.
Because of interference, bro.
Right, it was all power. It was all power.
It's plot armor, so sometimes the shields are and then when you don't need plot armor, they take it away from you. It's
Did you get those relays in? Did you relay your relays, bro?
6 in the writer's room, and therefore
to their defense, they just it's got to be hard because in some ways Star Trek is so advanced and so powerful and so godlike, and you can do anything, but then you have to make them vulnerable somehow, and so it's hard to reconcile all that.
Yeah,
I think they made them too powerful, too fast, too much, too soon. And it actually, if you're really methodically, especially if you're binging it nowadays, if you're methodically watching it, it drives you a little bit crazy because it's like, how can you be having this problem in this episode when in the previous one you drilled to the core of a planet and fixed its, magna pockets and stuff.
Also, something I'm going to give Next Gen a lot of credit on that. They did a great job building all the time. With the warp core change, things changed, everything progressed as they grew.
Right.
And then you got to, Voyager and things just happened.
Right.
Yeah, and I will agree. So there you go, Matt. There was a characteristic change in Next Gen. Also, Geordi and Worf did wear red shirts in the first season, and then they were gold.
Well, Geordi was a helmsman.
Exactly. He was navigator.
And then
and yet Geordi still pretty much, didn't really get the girl ever. and
Right, because he should have never.
right.
Because that's reality.
I mean,
Picard will
only
fix that.
change is that his uniform changed. I mean, well, great. He knows how to change his.
I kid, but I got a soft spot for the second season. Of course, it's not it's just, I don't know. Watching
Awful.
I think it was just
terrible.
It's
terrible.
When I watched Next Gen when I was a teenager, the first 2 seasons, loved it. Then going back, watching it years later, yeah, not so much. And then of course, I mean, no Star Trek is ever free from bad episode sin.
Listen, you guys just hate Dr. Plaska. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. So anyway, let's finish it off with this one. I want to get everybody's opinion on this. Real quick, favorite enemy in Star Trek. It could be any era.
The holodeck's lack of an off switch. If I were engineering a starship, there would be a manual old school toggle like out of Frankenstein next to the captain's chair, power on, power off, holodeck. So poor engineering of the holodeck safety systems on and off, that is the biggest enemy of Star Trek.
Fair enough. All right. What everybody else got for me? Is it all holodeck?
Nah, Q for me. I thoroughly enjoy Q. It's more of a frenemy.
Frenemy, yeah.
Maybe, a villain.
Still an adversary of many.
Yes.
What else you guys got for me? Ariel, how about you?
Gold Ducat.
Yeah. Oh God, brilliant.
I love Mark Limo to death.
Strong.
I just can't.
Yeah, good answer.
Matt, how about you?
The Dominion.
Yeah.
Hands down, best villain ever.
Yep.
Borg right behind him, but Dominion, best villain ever. Sad they're gone, but
well, they're still in the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah, but I mean, they're nowhere near what they were. But still, best villain, Dominion.
You're rooting for the Dominion.
the stakes were high.
Casey, how about you? What's the?
I would always like to say the Romulans, because they will never not be adversarial, and I think that's the best part about them. Is as much as you want to be their friends, they're never really your friends, but they're never not your friends. Good luck with that.
Very good. Well, I appreciate everybody being on tonight on this panel. It's been enlightening. It's been fantastic. I've loved every minute of it. You guys have shined some light on new stuff for me when it comes to Star Trek and how much I should hate TNG seasons 1 and 2, and should hate myself for not hating it, I guess. But no, I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking with me. And this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you all so much. And Star Trek Week does continue throughout the week, and many of you will still be guests. Tomorrow is the Scene Snobs podcast live. I'm having Joe Loud on there. He played Data on a script read. He's someone like you guys, a Trekkie himself, and he's going to be going over the world of, not the world of Star Trek, but like a lot of the storylines of Star Trek with me. Behind the Box, our Cult Classics podcast, is on Wednesday night live at 7:30. We will be talking the Cult of Star Trek, the Cult series of Star Trek, and we will also be doing our movie recommendation of the week analysis, which is Wrath of Khan versus Into Darkness. And then we have Rob Paints the Movies on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. live. He will be painting a very famous Trek villain, so make sure you check that out. And of course, the Friday night showcase, which some of you will be on, that is going to be filled with Trek trivia and prizes. So I am looking forward to having you guys on the show. It's going to be a good time. Bring your drinks, and we'll all just enjoy it and talk Star Trek. But thank you again. I want to thank our sponsor for tonight's show, which is Skyline Indie Film Festival. Right here, they are virtual this year because of COVID, but they are selling passes now. Go to skylineindiefilmfest.org. You can buy your passes. You can buy a full weekend pass, or you can buy certain movies that you want to watch. Check them out now and support. They're right here locally in Winchester, Virginia. And submit your films for next year as well. So thank you again to Casey, to Ian, to Ariel, to Matt, and to Alex. Thank you all so much for being on. Make sure you're checking out their shows and their films, and make sure we're re-electing Mr. Ian Lovejoy over there in Manassas. I wish I could vote for you, but I will pull for you because you are a good dude.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you all so much, and you guys have a great night. Thank you for joining in.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Live long and prosper.